Okay, hi everybody. I'm back with the second half of the of our critique. I guess I kind of went out of order because I critiqued project two first, but it doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to kind of go through these and do the same thing I did before, is just look at them and comment on what I think. Let's see. This one is Jessica's, yes. And I think this is really, really nice. The first thing that jumped out at me on this one was there's a balance of variety and simplicity. Clearly the hair is the focal point. Clearly the hair is kind of the dominant thing. And there's so much to look at in here. I really like that you were choosing phrases and words and kind of putting them together. It almost becomes a kind of um, a poetry in a sense, that you're kind of putting together bits and pieces of words and phrases, and when they come together, maybe kind of randomly, they create new meaning. And so I think that's really fun. I know that you were kind of concerned about how you did this, but you got a lot of good responses on it, and I think it's very imaginative. Here's something I want to point out that I really, really like. Um, that a lot of people kind of have to learn about, and this is called right here an implied line. And what that means is that she's defining the edge of her face, not by drawing an actual line like this one or by typing out an actual line like this, but just simply because each paragraph, I mean, each sentence or word ends along this kind of imaginary line. And what happens is our eye connects it together. And we very, very easily see that as, the side of the face. We understand the face is in front of the hair. And if she were to have drawn a line in there, or put a parentheses or something for a line there, it wouldn't have been as successful. It would have flattened things out a little bit. And so I appreciate that you're using that. Using that device, because it's a good one to know. But yeah, I think we are all in agreement. The hair especially looks great. There's just so much texture going on in there. So I think you did a really nice job on this one. Let's see. And then this one is Juan's, and also he got a lot of positive feedback from his peers on this one, and that's I can see why. This one is really, really tight. I think first of all, it's different from everybody else's in that you kind of you took it beyond what the actual assignment was, and kind of took it up to another level. And I think that's great. I also like that you're incorporating text, meaningful text, and so that it's also kind of poetry in a sense. And the the balance and variety is just awesome. This choice of letter type that you used for the hair, or the facial hair, it's kind of it's what we call a boldface type. No, wait, that's not what it's called. Well, it's kind of like the Old English. It's got that calligraphic look. It looks like it was, drawn with a calligraphy pen. It's kind of an old style typeface, and I think this is very appropriate for a religious theme, because we associate a lot of religious imagery with typefaces like this. Primarily because if we look back through history. And we this is the type of lettering that people were using in the 15th, 16th century. And so if you did see type with a religious image, it was usually something very close to this. So yeah, I think we're all in agreement that you just kind of really went above and beyond on this one. It's got so much uh, expression to it. It's like, I mean, I really, really get a lot of expression, especially in the eyes. And it's and that, that's one of the things that's really cool about this project is, um, I think it's remarkable how how people do this, and all they're really doing is kind of, tracing over a picture of themselves, and yet they always seem to have a lot of character coming through, and they always seem to have a lot of different personality. It's really fun to kind of go back and compare them to one another, because not just for how they look, but for how the personality comes through. Okay, so very, very pleased with that. And then this one is Raul, and he got some really good feedback on this one as well. Lots and lots of layering here. Again, I can't remember if it was yours or somebody else that I mentioned on the other project, but you could have taken up better use of your space here. If this was about 50% bigger than it is, it would be working better. You've got kind of a lot of empty space, and that's really my only that's like my only criticism. And it would be an easy fix, because all you need to do is like select everything and just hold your shift key and drag a corner. Other than that, yeah, again, the personality comes through. You got a lot of comments on using the letter J for your eyebrows, and I appreciate that you guys were actually looking at the typefaces and trying to find letters that fit the lines and the shapes on your face. And a lot of you said this was a lot more time consuming and tricky than it seemed. When you first looked at the assignment, and I think part of it is just the selection process. How am I going to find the right letter, for this? I mean, you can do something like this where he's created a line by putting a bunch of letters together. And that's one way to do it. He kind of did that here as well, and here. But this is really more simple, because it's just a single stroke, whereas this looks like stroke, 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 and it's all good. But this has a little bit more. I would say the eyes are probably the most effective part of this one. Yes, we got lots of good response on the dollar for the ear. And another thing I think you did really well is just building up that density of blacks. That's not a quick thing to do. You have to duplicate, 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 and I have no idea how many sublayers you have in there. But what starts to happen, and this is the same thing that happens when you do any kind of line work, meaning like you're making an image that is just white or just black line, and that's it. To build up value, areas of light and dark, you have to take the black lines and just put more and more lines on top of one another until they're blocking out all or most of the white background. So the way that we read value here, of course, we read this as pure white. We read these areas where there's no background showing through as pure black. And then the areas where there's some background showing through, these are various gray levels. And so you can see he went more dense right in here. Whoops, sorry, didn't mean to do that. He went more dense in here, and it created volume. It created a bit of a rounding, because things that are round and volumetric are not flat, and they're going to have variation in the highlights and the shadows. And so this is very very effective. A lot of you mentioned that you thought these looked cartoonish, and I heard that on several of them, and I just kind of want to explain why that is. Because you are working with black lines. If you look at the most sophisticated comics, the serial comics or whatever, or even the simplest, like what you guys did in your emojis, it's all kind of coming from the same place, which is black lines on a white ground, and making things minimal because it's graphic. And so these letters, if you think about them, they are all modeled after the way we were making letters before we had the printing press, which was, of course, with a pen or a brush. And so every letter, every part of the letter that you saw was a brush stroke. So this would be a stroke right here, then this would be one long stroke, and then they wouldn't pick up the brush, they would just keep going, and since the brush is a little flat, it would get thin and then thick again. And he's used a lot of what we would call thick and thin type, where the type is not consistently even all the way around, and it looks very much like the origin of these letters, which was pen and brush. And the cartoons, the graphic novels, I think a lot of those are still hand drawn. I know some of them are sketched out and then kind of drawn in Illustrator or another program, but I think a lot of people are still hand drawing those, and the way that they get those marks is they have India ink and a brush. And when they put down a lot of pressure on the brush, the line gets fat. When they lift off the pressure on the brush, the line gets thin, and that's what we call a calligraphic line. And that's why these look cartoonish, is because they're really using the exact same elements. So I'm glad you guys noticed, but this one looks really good. Let's go on to the next one, and let's see. I'm still trying to learn names. I believe this one is Tiffany's. Yes, I think this is Tiffany's, and also got a lot of positive feedback on this one. Oh, this is really, really nice, making that. I guess I don't know if that's a S or what, but that's a really, really good way of getting the nose there. And similar to some of the other ones, there's so much variety, especially in the hair, and this creates texture. And it really kind of gives us a sense of not just the overall shape of the hair, but the way it falls, and the way it separates, into different strands. So she's used a few of these calligraphic marks, and this is what I was talking about. Like, imagine that this line was made with a brush. The pointy part of the brush, the artist would drag and barely touch it to the paper. And then as the artist comes along here, presses down harder on the brush, the line gets fatter, and then coming to the end of the line, lifting up and lifting off. Okay, so that is your calligraphic line right here. And she's used these parentheses and these other, very, very simple characters. I think a lot of these are parentheses, or I'm not sure where this S is coming from, if that's like maybe, I don't know. There's a Zapfino has really kind of elongated letters like that, but I don't think it's that. I think Zapfino's fancier than that. But anyway, and she chose so many different typefaces to do the hair. And you've again, really, really fun that you've got fragments of words in there. You've got some things that seem to make words, some things that you have to kind of look, and maybe there's a word there and maybe it's not, but just really interesting how you guys kind of ran with that, and made this kind of random and visual poetry. One thing I would probably say on this one, that it's a minor thing, but I wish that this part was about here, and that there was about another inch of the head over the top. I think the head is cut off a little bit too close, and I think there's a little bit too much unused space down here. And since this up here is way more interesting than the empty space, I would probably say nudge the whole thing down. I don't know if maybe the photograph you had was cropped right there, but and if that's the case, I think I just would have scaled it up a little bit. So it's another example of needing to take better advantage of that space. So I'm going to just point this out every time I see it, so that it'll kind of start to sink in, and when the next time you're making something, this will kind of be in your mind. But yeah, just another really, really nice one. And then this one, I believe, is is this one Kevin? This is Kevin's. This one's got a tremendous amount of personality. And I think the thing that jumped out at me the most about this one was the eyes. He's got, well, this circus looking text right here. I haven't ever seen anybody use this one on this project before, and it's really interesting because it is kind of a three-dimensional, it's got some depth. It looks like it's actually, a little object sitting on a surface. I guess these are some kind of glyph or something. I don't know what these are, but that's really cool. I guess you went and found some of those. What are they called? The dingbats. And those can be really fun to work with. And a lot of students, I think, when they have this assignment, they completely overlook the fact that, there's several of those symbol alphabets that you can use. And so I think it's kind of refreshing to see that, you combined some letters. Here's that, that old world letter type again, with some more kind of contemporary looking symbols. And, just again, I wanted to point out what I was talking about a minute ago with the brush. Can you guys kind of imagine how this would have been formed with a single stroke, then a single stroke, and then lift, and then another, this here would be a stroke, and then without picking the brush up, lighten your touch and lift off. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. I was getting a little bit too much flourish there. You can't really do flourish with a mouse. It doesn't work. But anyway, I really like the texture on the eyes. I like the variety that I see. There's a lot of different things going on. I like the mouth because it's kind of minimal. And I guess the only thing I would say that you could do to make this a little bit better is, balance wise, it's a little top heavy. And by that, I mean that, we're going to be talking a lot about visual balance in this class. And, one thing that when we look at certain forms, that we perceive them as having a lot of weight or less weight. And one way that you can have a form be heavy is if it's dense, if there's a lot of black. And, if you think about something heavy, it kind of needs to be at the bottom of the composition because, it feels kind of rooted and weighed down. And so I think that, in my opinion, there could be a little bit more balance between the hair and the shirt. I actually think that the shirt, you could layer it a little bit and make it so that a little bit less white shows through than here. So that it's more dense, it's a little bit blacker. And I think then that not only will that balance out with the hair a little bit, I think it'll also help the face separate from the shirt. It's like it gets a little bit confusing right in here. And that could, easily be remedied by just like, say, taking all these Ks and duplicating them 2 or 3 times, stacking them so that it's 2 or 3 layers thick, and having some variation too. Maybe make them more dense in some areas than others. But that's my only real criticism on this, and it's not like it's anything bad. I think it just could use a little bit more work, just be a little bit more finished. Okay, going on to the next one. I believe this is Marcella. Let me just check my notes here. Yes, this is Marcella. And, another one that just has a tremendous amount of variety. So, she chose to do the initials for hair and face and ear and eye and nose. And I think that's really clever. This is also a good example of an implied line where she did not draw a line to create the edge of the hair. She just stopped. She just stopped filling the space with these letters. And our eye makes a line here. We connect this. We like things to be whole and we like things to be complete. So when we see something that's kind of broken up like this, it's actually very interesting because then our mind has to do a little bit of work to create that line. And when we're looking at things, our brains like that. And so, it's kind of a balance between, she's drawn lines here with rows of letters, but then she's created shapes without a linear edge. in the hair. And so, I think that's very effective. Um, yeah, I think the hair is probably the strongest part. I mean, I think it's all working well. This is an interesting typeface. Using one that has an outline like that, that's automatically, because it's got more white space in it, it's automatically going to be read by the eye as a lighter value. And I think you did lower your opacity a little bit in some of these areas to make them more subtle. At least that's what it looks like from my end. And so it's nice to see that variation in value. And here's another, here's a great way to illustrate it. Look at the visual weight that this letter has compared to this letter. Okay, this one is a white area with a black outline. This one's more solid black, much heavier. This one is heavier than this one and this one. This one, the strokes are thin. There's a lot of white space between the letters. It has less weight. And I think that this is a nice kind of variation in value, so that it goes kind of from dark to light to dark to light. And it's just simply by choosing a more dense or a less dense typeface. So very, very interesting. Nice work. Okay, and then this one is Carissa. And I really like this one. I think that we should crop it right here. I think we've got some unnecessary space over here that we don't need. And I think if this was cropped right here, that would be great. But other than that, really nice texture on the hair, really nice balance of 100% opacity with reduced opacity, so that the things that are more subtle, and things like noses can be kind of hard, and it's like sometimes we try to overdraw them and then they look kind of messed up, and noses should actually be handled very minimally, and it's just like you just barely need to make a couple of little lines right here, and then you're good. You're good to go. And so lowering the opacity a little bit makes it more subtle. Using the blocks of the grouping of letters here to make a shadow, very, very effective. And that gives you just a little bit of it. So here's a little shadow here, a little shadow here. So you really get the sense the light is coming from this way, hitting this side of the face, and leaving this side of the face in a little bit more shadow. A tremendous amount of personality coming through in this one. Having not ever met you guys, I don't really know what you look like, but I would be willing to bet that you probably all look pretty close to these portraits, because when I've given this assignment for quite a while now in my face-to-face classes, it's just remarkable, like how easy it is to recognize each student. And so, I don't know, maybe if I met you in face-to-face, I might recognize you based on these. I don't know. It would be interesting to find out. But, lots and lots of personality coming through in this one. I'm having a little trouble reading because my glasses aren't working great, but you've got some kind of text, some kind of statement here. There. Yeah, I think there's just a kind of a lot of flow of consciousness, writing on these, and then it's really, really neat. Excellent texture here. Excellent texture here. Now this one, for some reason, okay, I was kind of saying that I had a bit of a visual weight issue with this one. This one, for some reason, I am not bothered by the fact that the hair is more dense than it is on the bottom. And I think probably it just has to do with the shape. I think the fact that this area here provides a nice base, I mean, literally, we like to think about things as having a solid base to sit on so that they feel weighted down. And I'm not feeling this one as being out of balance. And I think it has to do with the shape of this down here, and I also think it has to do with the use of the negative space, which is working everywhere except for here. And I'm almost thinking that maybe you didn't check use artboards when you save this as a JPEG, because I'm thinking that maybe if you had, like, say your artboard is here, and you had like one little character over here, like one little comma or something that you didn't realize you had, if you don't click check artboards before you save it as a JPEG, whoops, um, it's going to include that space as part of the JPEG, and I think that's probably what happened, because I'm pretty sure that your image actually stopped here, and if so, that's kind of all the more reason why, you know, I feel like it's well balanced. But just check for that, you guys. It took me a while to figure out what was going on when some of these things were coming back with weird formats, and it's like you have to remember to check use artboard before you export on the Illustrator, or it will mess up your format. Okay, this one is I'm sorry, this isn't Kevin. It's not Juan. I'm embarrassed now. I'm gonna have to go back and peek. I didn't take good enough notes. I'm sorry. Let me go back and look real quick, see who it was. Roel? Was it Roel? Let me see. Not one. Is it Alan? Nope. It must be Roel. I know this is like awful that I couldn't remember your name. I ask for your forgiveness. Nope. Oh my goodness. I don't want to record this again, you guys, because I'm almost finished. Just fast forward over this part until I figure out whose piece this is. Is it Alan? No, I already checked that one. I don't even have an excuse. It's like I've had my coffee. It's early in the day. I'm not tired. Maybe I've just been doing a little too much this morning. Not Kevin. Okay, well, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and critique this, and I just am going to give my apologies for screwing up on that, because I don't want to re-record this. I thought I had made a note of who belonged to what. Next time I'll have you guys actually put it on the PowerPoint for me, so I don't have to go through this. So my apologies, and I will give you credit for it as soon as I remember who you are. But you know, this is another one that I think has a lot of personality. Let me see. Let me play from current slide. Another one that has a lot of personality. So, you know, one thing that I think is interesting about this is the weight of the line on the edge of the face. It is maybe a little bit heavy. You know, it's if you think about how fat and thick and heavy and dense this line is, and you compare it to these other parts here, it's probably a little bit heavy. Either maybe using a slightly thinner parentheses, or like I'd mentioned on some of the other ones, building up these dark areas a little bit more. You know, so you've got a nice kind of a medium gray happening in here. You know, I'm really glad to see you guys kind of picking up on that concept of how you make gray when all you have to work with is black line. And sometimes you can push it a lot farther than you think. And so I would do one of two things. I'd either thin this line down a little bit or bulk this up a little bit more. I like that you used the 0, 1 repeatedly. I think that's very appropriate for something like this. And I like the simplicity of the face. The letter C for the nose, good work. Maybe could have used like another parentheses right here. That might have kind of helped finish out that nose just a little bit. And the eyes, there's just like there's a lot of personality coming through. They look like they're shining. You know, that there's, I'm not sure if you use like a 9 or a 6 or what, but you've got some white spots in the center of these eyes that really look like they're reflecting light. And I really like that. So nice work. And again, my apologies for not even having noted your name. Okay, then we've got this one is, I'm looking at my notes here. This one is, this one's Alan. Okay. And so he was saying that this is his internet name, and I think this one's really tight. I think that it looks, very professional, and like, something you could just kind of put out there. It has kind of a logo type look, and that is appropriate because everything we're doing in these projects is very graphic-y. When we have a restriction on what we have to work with, and in this case, you're restricted to one thing, and that's black letters on a white ground. You have to get creative, to make it work. And it does cause you to simplify certain areas. It's not going to look like a photograph when you do it this way, and you don't want it to look like a photograph, But I think that, the variation, using the same, I think you said you used Helvetica on this one, using the same typeface, over and over, with the only variation being scale and bold or normal or light, it provides a tremendous amount of consistency. And so we talk in design about unity and variety. If you have too much unity, meaning if everything goes together too well, it's boring. But if you don't have unity, if you've got too much variety, it's just chaotic. And so what we're always looking for in design is a balance between things being unified, but not to the point that they're uninteresting. And so, the variation of scale, very consistent in the typeface, and using all the variation just coming from the weight of the letters and the opacity, very, very successful. So I think you got some good responses on this one. And maybe the only thing, and it's really minor, I could see just a little bit more line work, like say right in here. I think that this is the gradations and shadows are beautiful, but because you've got this kind of somewhat clear, simple, heavy line, I think you could probably use, like a parentheses right here where I'm kind of dragging my my pointer. Mainly because to make it integrate with the eyes better, because the eyes are probably the one thing that are handled differently from the rest of it. And I think just to get a tiny bit more unity, throw in one more element that looks like this, to kind of bring it all together. And that, I'm talking like one or two characters and you're done is my suggestion. So nice work on that. And I think that's it. I just want to kind of go back through these and again, commend you guys for doing such an awesome job. Having to work on this stuff on your own and having to figure it out without any help, except for what you could get from each other with your communication. And I'm really glad to see you guys communicating so much. I'm really happy with how these turned out. I'm glad that you enjoyed making these. And I have to admit, I'm kind of glad that you're like, oh, this is more work than I thought it was going to be, because a lot of things that look simple aren't easy, and so I think when you try something like this, it gives you an appreciation for, things that you might think are easy to do. Just because they have simplicity doesn't mean they didn't take a long time, So again, good work, you guys, and I look forward to our next critique.